Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hi, I'm Supervisor Paula Mahan, and welcome to Colonie Connect. Today we have two special guests, Jean Donovan, a member of my staff, as well as Michael Lyons from our planning department. Michael is a senior planner, and we have done some work on the Route 5 corridor study, and Mike did an awful lot of work on that and recently did a presentation for Town Board. And we'd like to share some of those findings with you today. So welcome, Jean. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the Route 5 corridor. And as you did this study, you actually found out a lot of history about the Route 5 corridor, which is actually Central Avenue running from Schenectady to Albany. So maybe you could start with a little bit of the history.
Sure. Actually, following the War of Independence in 1792, the State Assembly decided there was need for a turnpike or means to connect downtown Albany to the Cherry Valley of Utica, Rome area in order to expedite and move commerce from central New York, which was the west, to the Hudson River. So they started in 1799 the first 16-mile section of that roadway between downtown Albany and downtown Schenectady. It was constructed as a 33-foot wide roadway, and the purpose of it was meant to replace what at that time was the King's Highway, which was not so safe of a route to travel. Often you would need armed guards to travel that route, so it was quite an adventure. By 1801, in just 2 years, they had completed that 16 miles section between downtown Albany and downtown Schenectady. And let's see, and it was open for business. Within 2 years of completion, believe it or not, there was 28 taverns or inns already established from along the corridor. At that time, it was originally named the Albany-Schenectady Turnpike and was a toll road.
Okay. All right, so just like our thruway.
Yes, in many ways. It continued as a very viable means of access up until about 1925, when much of the commerce shifted when the Erie Canal was opened up. Some of the commerce that was using the turnpike now was coming down the Erie Canal through the Mohawk River corridor. And it wasn't until about 1830 that some of that commerce shifted back toward Central Avenue when the Mohawk-Hudson Railroad was established pretty much parallel to the Albany-Schenectady Turnpike, just on the south side that ran through the Pine Bush from Albany down to Schenectady and then over the river.
Okay, and so there's an awful lot of history there, and today, in today's times, it's one of our most important commercial corridors connecting Schenectady to Albany, and of course the village of Colonie in the center.
Correct.
So what we have today is a lot of redevelopment that we're promoting along the corridor, because it is an area, as you say, as you go back through history, it's been there for a long time and serves a major purpose. And as we look at where it's headed for the future, it is a very important corridor to protect. And there's a certain amount of space, or I should say miles, between Schenectady and the Village Line, and then between the Village Line and the Albany City Line. So about how much space do we have on each side?
Yeah, when we looked at the scope of the study, we broke it down into two segments. The eastern segment runs from the city line of Albany to the Village of Colonie line, roughly around Colonie Center or Wolf Road, and that's 1.8 miles. Then we have the Village of Colonie, in the middle, which is roughly another 4 miles of the corridor, and then the west segment, which starts right around new corner of Lye Road area and runs to the Schenectady line, and that's 3.8 miles.
Okay. All right, so that gives us an idea of the mileage along the corridor. I know one of the things that Mike, we talked about also, and Jean, we've talked about, we can see from this study that you've done that you can actually see where the activity on the corridor began, where we would consider it a suburb of the Albany city and a suburb of the the Schenectady city, I should say.
Sure.
And from the study now, things really began on the Albany city line side, coming towards the village.
Yeah, the eastern segment of Central Avenue has a much greater density and more of an urban appearance to it. Many of the old houses that were along or lined Central Avenue have since been converted over to small businesses or combined with additions placed on these buildings, or in some instances, actually, the buildings have been taken down and replaced with more modern type commercial buildings throughout the eastern end of the corridor. On the eastern end of the corridor, that land is zoned mainly NCORE, which is neighborhood commercial office retail, which promotes a connectivity between pedestrian and mass transit and travel links to try to be able to promote the bus service that is along the CDTA bus service that is along the Central Avenue corridor.
Okay, what we have now is the updated Bus Plus.
Bus Plus, yes.
Service as well, and the Schenectady city line, the western end of the corridor. I mean, you can actually see how, as that developed later, the lots were larger. There's more space, open space.
Yes, while it still has an urban appeal appeal to it, most of the parcels are much larger in size, as well as the type of buildings that were constructed. You see more of the 1950s, 1960s style commercial office buildings or commercial retail buildings that were constructed, rather than the converted over residence that you see along the eastern segment.
Okay. And Jean, I know we've done a lot with your experience in zoning and then planning, and now working with me and my staff. There's been a lot of collaboration with planning, and we have seen some changes currently on the Route 5 corridor with redevelopment of parcels, and maybe you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, even since this report was finished, we found that some of the buildings that we had classified as vacant have become, some of them redeveloped, and some of them have new tenants. And I think that's one of probably the most important things along this avenue. We have to look at redevelopment of this area. And one of the things that we knew, but it got really pointed out in the study that Mike prepared, was that you could see the close proximity to residential areas and the commercial zones, and that I don't think you see it anywhere in the town as significantly as you see it along the Route 5 corridor, which makes us take pause to make sure that the uses that we allow in that zone, the NCORE zone, are compatible with the close proximity to the residential zone.
Yeah, because we do see that the homes back right up to the businesses on the corridor, and trying to make that as the best that we can for being so close to the corridor. And it's very similar if you live in a city. It's very common for homes to back up to different types of commercial areas. But we do try to look very carefully in this day and age when we're putting a building up or redeveloping a building, what impact it's going to have on the neighborhoods, and so we do seek that neighborhood input the resident input, because sometimes they think of things that we can't, whether it's a certain type of buffer in a certain area or enclosure or whatever it might be to improve the situation. And so that's something that we've continually looked at. And I know some of the new redevelopment projects that we've had over the last few years, also some of the old abandoned buildings have been taken down,
Yes,
which is also a good advantage to being proactive with a project, because we can benefit by having the abandoned buildings taken down, even though it's a long process, it's a tough process. Sometimes we know the owners, sometimes we don't, but wherever we can, it's a good thing to do. And there are, as you say, it's zoned a specific way along the corridor. What are some of the things that are allowed on the corridor?
For example, on the eastern segment between Albany and the Wolf Road section, what's allowed primarily are commercial offices, commercial retail type of uses, which include food uses, services, auto-related services, as well as other types of auto retail services. Okay. There's also a little bit of industrial zoning districts that is along the eastern segment, and that's the former NL Industry site, which has gone under a Superfund cleanup through the Army Corps of Engineers. And my understanding is that cleanup has been completed. So, and then as you get closer to Colonie Center and Northway Mall, the zoning changes to highway commercial office residential, which allows much larger buildings as compared to the NCOR zoning district, which keeps the buildings more to a neighborhood scale and size, reducing the footprints of the buildings so that you don't get the large building causing an impact on the single-family residential, which are often, like you mentioned, abutting the site.
Right.
And one of the challenges in the, at least that I can see in the easterly section of the study, is the fact that we're small lots. We have some lots that are 6,000 square feet, some between 10, 18,000, which are small when you're looking for a commercial type development, and that's why we're looking to maybe have some incentives to help people along, whether they be a density requirement that we may lessen our density requirement or up our density requirement, whichever way you look at it. And the green space requirement is something we're also looking at. So,
well, it's those situations that are unique because as the corridor was built many years ago, conditions change, and rather than have buildings just sit there, it is important to develop good incentives so that small business owners can, get involved in developing a property that may be vacant for quite a while, and making the process more user-friendly for them, actually, so that the property can be put to good use. So I know some of those incentives have worked, and can you think of some of the redevelopment that has gone on maybe over the past year or two?
Well, we know Greenwood's Appliances redeveloped a portion of their property. I think they bought the property next door to them and put an addition onto theirs. We know in the corner of Wilson and Central there was 4 or 5 abandoned buildings that have since been taken down. I know we're working with a developer for something to be put on that site. We have the old abandoned dry cleaners that was up further on Central Avenue, around grounds. And I think that now has become a site that's currently under reconstruction by, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, Futia Tuxedos.
Yes.
So we've got that. And then there were a couple smaller homes on the other side. One became I know Michael worked on these. One became a hair salon, and the other became an antique dealer. So
very good.
Worked in those.
Yeah, because often with these smaller homes, when they can get converted over from residential, each side of them are usually already developed in some way, shape, or form. So you're very limited on how much parking you can get on a very narrow site. Sometimes these lots are only 60 feet wide. And So you're very limited on the amount of parking you can get. So as you do a site plan review, you have to be very careful as to how much type of development or density you can put on one of these smaller sites and still have the site work and not have cars parking around the corner onto the residential street and causing an issue there.
Yeah, those are all important factors that you have to look at. And on the western end, we also have the old Dexter's Plaza that was redone.
That's right. That was redone, yes.
And a couple others on that side of the corridor that have been redeveloped, which it's good to see. So.
And one of the I think is a great economic development tool that Mike has created is that this study shows all the infrastructure that's already in existence, which is a good promotion for us as we look to redevelop this corridor or develop some vacant property in the western part of town. And it also shows distinctly that I think in the eastern section of town, Mike, and you can address this, that there are really no environmental issues that anyone has to deal with as far as creeks or wetlands. But in the western end of town, we do have the Lyons.
That's correct.
There, yeah.
Yeah. So again, that puts some type of restriction on there, and again, it's finding what fits into each individual spot that we're looking to redevelop. And the reason that I had asked for this study, we talked about this about a year ago, and it's one of the areas that was identified as one of the older areas, but very important commercial corridor, as well as lots and lots of residents within walking distance to the corridor. And with the comprehensive plan, it called to look at some of the areas that would need redevelopment and improvement in the future. And so we focused on the Route 5 corridor because, number one, it is so valuable to the town. It's an area that certainly houses a tremendous amount of commercial businesses and a lot of activity, as well as improving the situation for the residents in the streets that abut up to the commercial property. So there are a lot of reasons to look at this particular area, and it kind of fell in line with a lot of the improvements that they made on the Route 5 corridor. I know we had talked a while ago about some of the funding that was provided, the grants that were provided for upgrades on the corridor. I think some of it was the paving and the lighting and the CDTA with the shelters and the new buses and things like that. Safer pedestrian crossings, and all of those upgrades contributed and really fell into the realm of it's a good time to take a look at the corridor. And you really covered a lot of territory, Mike, and you also, as well as identifying some of the needs for the future on the corridor and strategies as to how to approach it, also brought forth a lot of history. I know you did a presentation at one of our town board meetings, and people found it very interesting, a lot of history that they didn't know existed on the corridor. And you came up with some specific recommendations for the board to consider, and the planning board, zoning, everyone to consider when we're looking at redevelopment for the corridor. Maybe you could go over some of those recommendations.
I just happen to have them written out, Michael.
Yeah. The first recommendation is to how to promote redevelopment opportunities and how to get the word out to developers to develop along the Central Avenue corridor. Some of the ideas that we thought would be to increase the available density on the site. For example, if you have a very small site now, and downstairs may be converted from a residence to a small business, and then the top might be 2 apartments. Under our current zoning, you really can't get that type of density on a smaller lot. So there may be some type of encouragements through incentives or density incentives. If someone were to redevelop, possibly making the parcel bigger or doing something that would aid in the redevelopment of the town, and try to move towards some of the new design standards that the land use law now promotes with regards to moving the parking from the front yard to the side or to the rear. keeping the buildings forward so that they're very pedestrian friendly, and as well as looking at the actual facade of the building to provide an update along the corridor.
Okay, that's.
Okay.
I know that that's one of the or several of the recommendations. Jean, you talked about the green space requirements, so that they do provide that incentive. If you have a lot and a redevelopment project, and if we're requiring a certain amount of green space, say 35%, and it's impossible for that particular redevelopment to have that type of space, is there some type of incentive? Because there are a lot of other ways to improve green space with shrubbery and things like that really, really make the property, look really nice and updated, as well as providing the look of the green space that we're actually asking for. I know some of the other things, intersection improvements, we talked a little bit about that. As far as the former NL, as you mentioned, that was a Superfund site, and the cleanup has taken place. The only thing I've heard about the site was possibly somewhere in the future being used as an exit to a roadway to connect.
Yeah, one of the recommendations
Avenue.
that has been coming out of a kind of a parallel study that's been going on through the Capital District Transportation Commission is the Railroad Avenue Corridor study, which is a linkage study using federal funds. One of the ideas or recommendations that is coming out of that study is the possibility of extending Railroad Avenue southbound to Central Avenue, and possibly connecting to Central Avenue at possibly Osborne Road, where there's an existing signalized intersection. That would help move transfer some of the traffic from the Railroad Avenue that wants to go south or east on Central Avenue, move it from the Maplewood Avenue neighborhood or the Craft Avenue neighborhood, and move it over to more of an industrial route, taking it right to Central Avenue.
Okay, so that would help to relieve some of the traffic congestion and things like that
And the
in that
impact
area.
on the neighborhoods, again, which back right up to some of the industrial uses in that corridor.
Yes, there are, as you say, there are studies going on simultaneously, whether it's the Railroad Avenue linkage study, we have the Route 32 study, and of course our study on the corridor, and trying to tie in, especially with the corridor, with some of the things that the state was doing, because that's a state highway. So it's putting all those pieces together and everybody being on the same page at the same time. But I think there's been a lot of improvement on the corridor already. I see.
Yes,
I get a lot
been
of people talking about the improvements.
There's a lot of interest in Central Avenue, not only from the town's perspective, but also from the New York State DOT, who wants to maintain and keep the flow of traffic moving.
Right.
From the CDTA, which has put major investments into the corridor with the new Plus system, which is the first in the Capital District. They have a ridership along the Central Avenue corridor from downtown to downtown of roughly 10,000 passengers a day.
Wow.
So they get quite a few riders.
Mike, one of the things too that we had talked about when you talk about the state is the fact that they are looking, especially down the eastern section of the corridor, that there, with the small lots, there are many separate entrances very close to each other, and we're looking for more connectivity between the sites so that the flow of traffic is smoother between the sites and onto the avenue too.
Right. The state DOT calls that the corridor access management, and what that tries to promote is, if you're a corner lot, they would like to see the driveways come out to the side street, so that you don't have a driveway every 100 feet, because that has a tendency to have a reduction in the flow of traffic along the corridor. Or if two businesses mid-block are being redeveloped or coming in right next to each other, one of the thoughts is to have them share a driveway. to allow them to have less pavement, because if you're sharing a driveway, and then have the parking lots come off that shared driveway, and to improve the businesses and allow connectivity between businesses.
That was one of the, I think that was one of the big achievements that was able to be accomplished when we were doing the redevelopment of the old Dexter Shoe site
Yes.
and the plaza. We were able to combine it to one entrance, and then, you know, the flow of traffic is much easier and more efficient in that area, too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, very often when you do these types of studies, you know, you're looking for the outcome you're looking for is to come up with an overview of the particular area, but as well as strategies for improvement as you move through the future. And in this case, you know, tying some of the tying it in with the goals of the comprehensive plan, and it's not just the town's portion that you have to work on, but you also, again, have to work in conjunction with, you know, with the state DOT and with CDTA and, you know, small business advisory councils that we have to see what type of needs do they have. You know, your larger businesses, what types of offices would be good for the area. We've also limited the motels and hotels because it's saturated, the corridor's saturated with motels and hotels. So we've had a moratorium for that, and that has helped a lot. But it's all of these agencies coming together with the town, along with the resident input, to be able to come up with plans that meet everyone's needs the best that we can. And that's why this study is really helpful. Mike, you certainly did a great job on it. We appreciate all the work that you put into it, and it will definitely help us as we move forward. We've had some good successes with the corridor so far, and there's a lot more that we can do. So some studies such as this is really, really helpful. So I appreciate all the work that you put into it, and being here today to share some of this with our viewers, along with, I know Jean's input has been very helpful, having many years in zoning and planning, and having an idea of where we were when the comprehensive plan was finished and what that called for, and what direction we're moving in currently. So it's very helpful to have that background knowledge as well. But I do appreciate you both being here. We're just about out of time. So thank you, Mike, for all your hard work and for being a guest today. And thank you, Jean, for being a guest, as well as all of the input that you've provided. It's very helpful. So we will proceed and see how we can work these strategies into our future plans. So thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you for tuning in to Colonie Connect.